Hey everybody, let's make some epic Yeti bases. Snowy bases. Snowy Mountain Yeti bases. So first off, I'm going to find a position for this guy on a piece of bark that I found at the park with my dog. He has a little bit of an odd pose, so I want to make sure that he's standing upright. Next, I'm going to use some strong PVA glue, a craft glue. I like Eileen's tacky glue. You can find it at Walmart. It's pretty cheap and it's pretty strong. And then I'm going to use that same glue and I'm going to put some on the base and go ahead and sprinkle some gravel and just little texture stuff around the base. I keep an assortment of little pieces of gravel, like pieces of aquarium gravel and just little rocks and things like that in a little Tupperware, and then I use it for basing whenever I want to put some boulders around a mini. Next up, I'm going to come in with some finer little pieces of gravel. This is model railroad ballast. Obviously you don't need to use a fancy kind of sand. I just had some of this lying around, so I decided to use it. But I do kind of like how it looks around these boulders, because they look like larger rocks than just, I don't know, sand. And before I start painting, I'm going to go ahead and pin my model. So I'm just using a little drill bit and a hand drill that is the size of a paper clip. So that's the reason why I like it, is because I can just use paper clips and then take a little piece of paper clip and then put it through there and pin my base and then snip it off and use that as a pin, or like a piece of rebar in concrete or something like that to reinforce that joint. And I'm going to pin the model first and then the base second. So I want to make sure that the pose is right, and I'll line him up right. But it's much easier to pin a base than it is to pin a little foot on a model. And it's time to have a priming party. But priming is super important, especially with things like cork bark or bark, things like that, because it's going to soak up that paint. It's going to soak up the primer paint, which is it gives something for the model paint to stick to, and it has different properties. But also you want the cork to soak up the primer paint, because it's gonna preserve it and it's gonna protect it, and it's important, trust me. If you've ever bought models off of eBay or something and then the paint peels off of the models, the number one reason that happens is not because the person didn't varnish or they didn't protect the model. It's because they didn't prime them any first. So the paint just doesn't want to stick to like whatever type of plastic or metal, especially metal. And I'm not going to do any more airbrushing on the bases, at least. The models are going to get more of a zenithal prime or airbrushing or whatever, but this is, I'm just going to go straight in with some dry brushing, because I want the rock to have kind of like a natural slate kind of look. And in other words, I want it to have those really dark shadows. And then I'm going to have the highlights, the parts of the rock that are getting the most light, or some areas that I want to be gray, to be a really light gray to make them pop out. So I want some high key, high contrast, and the best way to do that is just going to be for me to work straight from black. So as I do different colors, I'm going to work from my darkest colors to my lightest colors. So I want some nice dark browns in there. I want some greens. I want some kind of like mossy looking colors. And then I want some grays also. But I'm going to work from darkest to lightest. So we're working from a jet black all the way up to like a light gray. And also, as I get lighter with my colors, I'm going to put less and less on the model. And I'm going to take more off of the paintbrush first. So, you know, like I see a lot of people when they do dry brushing, they beat the crap out of their brushes. And you don't really have to do that. I mean, what you really need to do is just be really light. Just be really, really gentle when you're doing your dry brushing. Especially when you get to your lightest colors, because you want your lightest colors to really pop out, and you're creating super high key highlights. But you don't need to beat the crap out of your brushes. Just make sure that you're being really gentle when you're doing dry brushing. And another thing that I like to do as kind of a last step, and you can do this when the paint is still a little bit wet, when it's still a little tacky, and you can kind of get a cool effect from it, is I use weathering pigments, or what I personally use is I like pan pastels, and pan pastels are just ground up pastel pigments that are in a pan, and it's actually a brand name. I know it doesn't sound like a brand name. It's one of those generic brand names like cornflakes or like paper clips or whatever, where it's like that's an actual brand name. But pan pastels they're basically the same thing as weathering pigments. They're going to be way cheaper, but it's going to take you forever to go through a pan of pan pastels. But one of the nice things about pan pastels too versus weathering pigments is that instead of having weird names like Russian gray or like, you know, Afghanistan mud or whatever it is, they're going to have names that are actual pigment names, like burnt sienna, raw sienna, things like that, which are they're actually the name burnt sienna comes from people. It's a pigment that's a natural earth pigment that they take it out of the ground and then they burn it. That's how you get burnt sienna, which goes back to like cave paintings. But same thing with the paints. You want to start with your darkest colors first, and then work your way up to your lightest colors to create those highlights. Another thing that's cool about pan pastels is that you are never ever going to find green weathering pigments if you want to do some like little moss kind of effects on your rocks. And also the thing that's different about the pan pastels or weathering pigments is that they like to collect in the cracks versus dry brushing, where it's you're picking out the highest highlights. So two different things. And I'm going to put down some little static grass stuffs too. These things they're kind of expensive, I feel like. I kind of use them sparingly, and you know, they're fun looking. Like you can make your own. You can buy static grass and you can make your own little static grass tufts and everything, but they're kind of a pain in the butt to make. But it costs like $10 for like a big a thing of like not that many static grass tufts, so I use them kind of sparingly. And then I'm gonna go around those guys and I'm gonna use some little pieces of clump foliage. And I like to keep a mix of clump foliage. It's just like anytime that I have a project that uses some kind of foliage, then I take the leftovers and then just kind of mix them together, and then you get a nice mix of sort of different types of foliage there. It looks a little bit more realistic than all being one color and one shape and like fineness and everything. I'm also going to use just a little tiny bit of some super fine grit sand and sprinkle it on there too, just because it looks cool. So that's all the painting, or at least on the base. These guys they're supposed to be Yetis too. So I feel like it needs some snow. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go ahead and paint up the mini first, and then I'm going to put him down, put his foot down, and then I'm gonna add snow around there, and I'm gonna use a Vallejo basing product that looks like snow. So after I've got my model painted up and then I've glued him to his base, and I typically don't do models in like sub-assemblies, but this is one case where, you know, I wanted to do a really nice looking job on the base, and then I wanted to paint up the model separately. So this guy is still going to see use in my games, but it took a little bit more work to get this, you know, assembly done and then everything. But you guys get to see all the benefit of how I based this guy. So I'm using a Vallejo product that is supposed to look like snow, and I like it. There are ways that you could make a very similar product. You could use baking soda and then like a little bit of white paint and then some acrylic medium and make your own, but this is not that expensive and they've already made it for you, and it's a very similar type of product. I have heard horror stories about baking soda changing color. I've seen people where they use baking soda and super glue as a gap filler, and then I've heard that it will have a chemical reaction later and start bubbling or changing color, turning yellow and things like that. So if you're gonna spend a lot of time, you know, you might as well just, I don't know, might as well just have Vallejo do it for you. But I do like this product. I think it looks cool. So I'm trying to take the snow and then put it on little areas where I think it would collect in the wind. So yeah, maybe pick one direction where you think that the wind might be coming from, and then have the snow collect in those areas. So it still doesn't look quite snowy enough for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and do some dry brushing on here and get this guy to look a little snowier. And I thought about using, what I was going to do was I was going to varnish him, and then I was going to sprinkle some baking soda on him, or like some fake snow or something. But can't get fake snow right now because coronavirus. So anyways, yeah, I decided to just dry brush this guy, and then I'm going to go ahead and dry brush the base and then make it a little snowier looking. Next up, I'm going to go around the rims of these guys and repaint the bases black. And I typically like to use a flat for this. A flat is just a flat brush compared to like a filbert or whatever. It's just a flat tip. I also like to use flats for dry brushing. So anyways, that's going to be it, you guys. Yeah, don't look at the models, look at the bases. The models aren't done yet. Look at the bases. So yeah, I hope you guys are all doing good. I hope that you are staying safe and sane and all that, and taking care of yourselves. But yeah, don't look at the models on these guys because they're not done painted yet. This is a basing video. In fact, there, look at the bases. Look, would you just look at them? Yeah, if you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like or subscribing. You know, all it means is that I might pop up in your feed every once in a while, and instead of like somebody fighting in McDonald's or like cat videos or drama or whatever else YouTube usually shows people. Anyways, yeah, take care of yourselves.